My wife cheated with my protégé, stole my company. But they didn't read the fine print I wrote. The moment my wife Isabel smirked across the mahogany conference table, I knew. I had been expecting it for weeks, maybe even months, ever since the whispers started, the stolen glances between board members, the sudden closed-door meetings that didn't concern me. My instincts had screamed at me to prepare for the inevitable, and yet watching it unfold, I still felt the gut punch of betrayal. The board voted. "You're out," she said. The words left her lips with the smoothness of someone delivering a well-rehearsed performance. She leaned back in her chair, her perfectly manicured fingers lacing together as if she had just won a chess match. And perhaps, in her mind, she had. Across the table I saw Ryan, my former executive, sitting smugly at her side. His navy blue suit was crisp, his tie slightly loosened, just enough to make him appear at ease yet in control. I had mentored that man, groomed him for leadership. I had shaken his hand on his first day, told him the company would reward hard work and loyalty. And here he was, sitting in the seat that should have been mine. Correction, the seat they thought would be his. "I'm sorry, Lucas," Isabel continued, though she didn't look sorry at all. "This is business, not personal, business." That was rich, considering she had just declared that her boyfriend, the man she had secretly been seeing while still legally married to me, was now the CEO of the company I had built from the ground up. I stayed seated, my posture relaxed despite the tension crackling through the room. I refused to give her the satisfaction of an outburst, the desperate pleading she was expecting. Instead, I let a faint smile play at my lips and flipped open the leather portfolio in front of me. "On check page 391, I said smoothly, my voice calm, controlled. I heard the subtle shifting in their seats, the nervousness of the board members who had aligned with her. Isabel's smirk faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly, lifting her chin. "It's on page 391, she demanded. I let the silence stretch, dragging the tension tighter, making them feel the weight of the mistake they had just made. Across the table, Matthew, my chief legal counsel and the only man in the room who had remained loyal, met my gaze with the barest flicker of amusement. He knew. He had known for weeks. "In succession clause," I said finally, enunciating each word deliberately. "1T requires any incoming CEO to have at least 10 years of executive leadership experience in a technology firm." I tilted my head slightly, feigning curiosity. "Ryan, how long have you been in senior management?" Ryan's confidence wavered. 3 years, he admitted, his voice quieter than before. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. "Well, that's unfortunate." I watched as the realization sank in, like water filling a sinking ship. "This is just a technicality," Isabel snapped. "And a board has the power to amend the clause." Matthew cleared his throat. "Actually, we can't." Her head snapped toward him. "10 clause was written into the company's founding documents," he continued, his tone almost casual, "and would require a 100% shareholder vote to modify." My smile widened just slightly. "As the majority shareholder," I said, "and so not voting for that change." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly looking less like a confident CEO and more like a man who had just realized he had gambled everything and lost. Isabel, however, wasn't one to back down easily. "Oh, we'll fight this," she said, jaw tightening. "Opponent to board has already made its decision, and we can take this to court if we have to." I shrugged. "Oh, you're welcome to try. But let me remind you, this clause isn't something I threw in at the last minute. It's ironclad." Her nails tapped against the table, her mind spinning, looking for an escape route. Ryan finally spoke, attempting to regain some ground. "Oh, we can find a workaround," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Tennis doesn't change the fact that the board believes new leadership is necessary." I turned to the board members, the very same people I had personally hired, the ones who had once pledged their loyalty to me. "New leadership?" I echoed as if tasting the words. "That's interesting, considering I've doubled this company's valuation in the last 5 years." A few of them looked away, guilty, weak. "And no," I continued, letting my gaze move deliberately across the room, "NSI had my suspicions about certain meetings happening behind my back. So I did my own investigating." Ryan tensed, Isabel's lips pressed into a thin line. "I have copies of every private email, text exchange, and financial proposal that led up to this little coup," I said. I paused, then added, "Son, I also have a few rather interesting discrepancies in the company's expense reports." Matthew slid a folder across the table. "Honey, would you like to explain?" I asked, tapping the cover. "Tanked why over $300,000 was funneled through a private consulting firm that just so happens to be registered under your name, Ryan?" Ryan went pale. Isabel's face darkened. She started, but I held up a hand. And you see, I've been patient, I said, my voice lower now, more measured. And I watched. I waited. I let you dig your own graves. I glanced at the board again. And I'm willing to let this slide for those of you who were merely misled into voting against me. My gaze flicked to Ryan and Isabel. But for those who actively participated in an attempted corporate takeover through fraud, I'm afraid there will be consequences. More silence. Matthew leaned forward, his voice polite but firm. As there's still time for those who wish to distance themselves from this unfortunate situation. 3 board members immediately pushed back their chairs. I resign, one of them muttered. So do I, another echoed. Isabel's face twisted in rage as she realized what was happening. Sit down, she hissed. You're all cowards. Oh no, I interrupted, standing up slowly, and just smart enough to know when they've lost. I adjusted my cufflinks and turned to my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, if things went the way I intended. Oh no, Isabel, I said quietly, savoring the moment. All this isn't over. Her eyes burned with hatred. Oh no, Lucas, she spat, voice shaking with fury, and it's just beginning. She stormed out of the room, Ryan scrambling after her. The remaining board members looked anywhere but at me, the weight of their guilt pressing down on them. I let them stew in their discomfort before finally breaking the silence. Now, I said, pressing my palms flat against the cool mahogany table. Let's discuss why a special board meeting was called without notifying the CEO. 1 hour later, 3 more board members had resigned. I accepted their departures with a gracious nod, while Matthew quietly set their replacements in motion. The second I stepped back into my office, I finally let the weight of what had just happened settle onto my shoulders. My wife had betrayed me. My own wife had tried to steal the company I'd spent my life building. I walked to the floor-ceiling windows, gazing at the skyline, a soft knock at the door. Matthew entered, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you might need this, he said. I took it, grateful. Said, how long have you known? I asked. 3 weeks, he admitted. Isabel asked me to review succession procedures. She didn't realize I helped write them. I nodded. Of course she hadn't. She had always underestimated me. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. Some may have won this round, but don't get too comfortable. There's more than one way to take control of a company. I showed it to Matthew. Would you like me to start documenting everything? He asked. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Please. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I sat in my office, the lights dimmed, the city skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. A glass of scotch rested on my desk, untouched. The adrenaline from the coup had faded, but something colder had settled in its place, resolve. They thought they had won. Isabel and Ryan, smug in their arrogance, believed they had me cornered. They had played their cards, expecting me to fold, not realizing I had been stacking the deck long before they even entered the game. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I had built Carter Innovations from nothing. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led to a company that now stood as an empire, a billion-dollar powerhouse. And my wife, had tried to rip it from me. But I wasn't a fool. I had seen the signs months ago. Whispers had started among the senior staff. Conversations would end the moment I stepped into a room. Isabel, who had once rolled her eyes at my passion for the company, had suddenly taken a deep interest in board meetings, financials, and executive strategy. And Ryan, the man I had once mentored, whom I had given a shot when no one else would, had spent the last year circling Isabel like a vulture. They thought they were being subtle, but I had seen it coming from miles away. So I did what any man in my position would do. I prepared for war. Isabel's voice still echoed in my head from the boardroom. Oh, fight this. They had no idea how deep the trap went. It had started with small strategic moves. I rewrote the company's succession clause, buried in the legal documents that no one ever bothered to read, page 391, tucked away like an insurance policy. The clause required 10 years of executive leadership experience in a technology firm. Something Ryan, with his pathetic 3 years, did not have. I had put that in place years ago after watching a friend lose his startup to a board coup. I swore that no one would ever take Carter Innovations from me without earning it, and now my own wife had walked straight into it. The best part? I hadn't even needed to lift a finger. The moment I revealed the clause, the board started turning on itself. The cracks began to show. Those who had aligned with Isabel and Ryan because they thought I was out of the picture suddenly realized their mistake. Ryan wasn't eligible, and that meant they had backed the wrong horse. I had sat there, watching the panic set in, knowing exactly what would happen next. By the time I left the boardroom, 3 members had already resigned, their tails between their legs. The others, they stayed, but they weren't standing with Isabel anymore. They were standing with whoever could still hold power, and that was me. Back in my office, Matthew was waiting, flipping through a stack of papers. "Well," he said, smirking, "Tintant went exactly as planned." I sank into my chair. "Better." He tossed a document onto my desk, resignation letters, signed official, and we already have replacements lined up. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. Could. The fewer loose ends, the better. Matthew sat down across from me, tapping the edge of the folder. "Oh, now, the real question is, how far do you want to take this?" I already knew the answer. "As far as necessary," I said. He nodded. "Oh, we need to talk about the next move." While I had spent months laying my own groundwork, Isabel and Ryan hadn't been careful. They had been sloppy, arrogant, convinced that I would never see it coming. What they didn't realize was that I had been watching them the entire time. Matthew opened another folder and slid it toward me. "You're going to like this." Inside were financial records, transactions that shouldn't have existed. Ryan had been funneling money into a private consulting firm, one that was registered under his own name. Over $300,000 had been siphoned out of Carter Innovations' marketing budget into Ryan's personal accounts. Fraud. I let out a slow, humorless laugh. Well, of course he was. Matthew leaned forward. "But that's not the best part." I raised an eyebrow. "There's more?" "Oh yeah. He flipped the page. It wasn't just Ryan." I felt my pulse slow as I scanned the document. Isabel's signature was on the transactions. She had approved the payments. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the evidence. She had played the role of the power-hungry wife, the woman who just wanted to save the company from my so-called stubborn leadership, but in reality she had been stealing from me the entire time. And that changed everything. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline. "We release this," I said. Matthew nodded, to the board, to the SEC, to everyone. This wasn't just about taking back control anymore. This was about destroying them. Isabel and Ryan had tried to ruin me, to rip my legacy out from under me, and they had done it while committing financial fraud. No, they weren't walking away from this. I turned to Matthew. "And you want every department audited, every expense report, every transaction, every meeting they took without my approval." His smirk widened. "Already on it." My phone buzzed, a text from Isabel. "Some may have won this round, but don't get too comfortable. There's more than one way to take control of a company." I exhaled slowly, then handed my phone to Matthew. "Start documenting everything." His expression turned sharp. "This is war, then." I stood, walking to the window. It was always war. The moment Isabel stormed out of the boardroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor, the rest of the board members sat in tense silence. Some looked anywhere but at me, guilt etched across their faces. Others shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing they had placed their bets on the wrong horse. I let them stew in it. Finally, I stood, pressing my palms against the mahogany table. My voice was calm, deliberate. "Oh, now," I said, surveying them one by one, "and let's discuss why a special board meeting was called without notifying the CEO." A few cleared their throats, feigning surprise, but no one spoke. I exhaled slowly. "No excuses, gentlemen. You all knew exactly what you were doing." A beat of silence. Then one of them, Gregory Tanner, the CFO, shifted forward in his chair. He had been on the fence from the start. I could tell he was one of those spineless executives who moved wherever the tide took him. "Lucas," he started, his voice laced with false diplomacy. "And there were concerns about—" I cut him off with a slight raise of my hand. "About what, Gregory? My focus on Rand? My refusal to take the company public?" His mouth opened and closed. He had nothing to say because they all knew the truth. Carter Innovations had never been stronger. We were growing, thriving. But I had refused to rush us into a reckless expansion that would dilute our brand. That was my real crime, being cautious instead of reckless. And Isabel had used it to turn the board against me. I walked around the table, my presence looming over them. "So I understand concerns," I said, pausing behind Richard Gale, another board member who had sided with Isabel. "What I don't understand is why no one brought them to me directly." No one spoke. I leaned down slightly, lowering my voice just enough to make them uneasy. "And because this wasn't about company concerns, was it? This was about a power grab." Gale swallowed hard. I straightened and turned back to Matthew, my legal counsel, who had been sitting quietly through all of this. "And have the resignation letters been prepared?" I asked him. Matthew smiled slightly, opening a folder. And they're right here." I slid them across the table. "If you voted against me today," I said, He said you have two options: resign voluntarily or expect a thorough audit of your past financials. The threat was subtle but clear. Within minutes, 3 more board members resigned. The ones who remained, they knew they had no choice but to fall in line. By the time I stepped back into my office, Matthew was already making the necessary arrangements to replace the board members who had fled. I sank into my chair, finally allowing myself a moment to process. My own wife had tried to stage a coup against me. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd betrayed everything I had built. And she had done it with another man sitting beside her, thinking she could strip me of my life's work as if I was disposable. The sheer audacity of it made my hands tighten into fists. A knock on my door. Matthew stepped in holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said. I took it, nodding my thanks. "How bad is the damage?" I asked. He sighed, taking a seat. "Well, the good news is, with the board purge, we can get things back under control quickly. The bad news?" He glanced at his phone. "Isabel is already moving to retaliate." I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. "She's already working on rallying internal support," Matthew said, sliding his phone across the desk. "She just sent out an email to the entire company. Subject line, important company updates and strategic vision discussion." I picked up the phone and scanned the message. "To all Carter Innovations employees, effective immediately, we are entering a new era of leadership and innovation. Transparency, progress, and bold decision-making will be at the forefront of our strategy. We will not be held back by outdated leadership models. An all-hands meeting will be held tomorrow to discuss the future direction of the company." It was perfectly worded to imply that I was the problem, that I was holding the company back, that she was the future. I smirked and handed the phone back. "Cancel the meeting." Matthew didn't even blink. "Already did." I nodded. "Also, revoke all her administrative access. I don't want her sending anything to the company without my approval." "Done." A beat of silence. Then Matthew asked, "Should we be worried?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, then exhaled. Not for the company, but things are about to get messy." By the time I got home that night, my phone had already buzzed twice with new messages from Isabel. The first one was simple: "You're pathetic." The second: "If you think this is over, you're dead wrong." I ignored them both. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat down on the couch, and let the tension in my muscles ease. But I knew better than to think it was over. Isabel wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. She had staked everything on taking me down, and instead she had walked out of that boardroom powerless. She would never let that stand. I had barely finished my drink when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text from Isabel, it was from my father. "Call me now." I let out a slow breath, already knowing what was coming: the family intervention. The second I stepped inside my parents' house later that night, I knew Isabel had gotten to them first. My mother was perched anxiously on the edge of the sofa. My father was pacing near the fireplace, his face unreadable. I barely had time to set my briefcase down before my mother stood, her voice tight. "Lucas," she began. "Was this about you blocking Isabel from advancing in the company?" I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. That was an interesting way to describe what had happened. I turned to my father. "But let me guess. She told you I'm trying to stifle progress, that I'm afraid of change." "She told us you blindsided her," my father said, folding his arms. "Did you manipulated the board to push her out?" I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "So, she conveniently left out the part where she orchestrated a backroom deal to steal the company out from under me?" My mother frowned. "Lucas, it's not that simple." I cut her off. "Actually, it is." I walked over to the fireplace, leaning against the mantel. Isabel and her boyfriend, because let's not forget that detail, staged a coup. They manipulated board members into an illegal vote to force me out. My father's brow furrowed. "She legal?" "She illegal," I confirmed. "Not only that, but Ryan isn't even qualified to be CEO. He doesn't meet the requirements." Silence. Then my mother whispered, "She just wants to help." I shook my head slowly. "No, she wants power." By the time I left my parents' house, I knew exactly what was coming next. Isabel had played the victim card. She was rallying support, planting seeds of doubt in the people closest to me. But she had underestimated one thing. I didn't just play defense. I played to win. That night, I pulled out my laptop and composed an email to Matthew. "I need every expense report from Isabel's department, every failed project, every reckless decision." I hit send. If Isabel wanted a war, she was about to get one. I arrived at Carter Innovations early the next morning, but I already knew I wasn't the first one in the building. The tension in the air was palpable. The employees sensed something was off. Whispers followed me as I walked through the halls. People tried not to make eye contact. They had seen the emails. They had heard the rumors. Isabel had been busy overnight, spinning her own version of the story. She wasn't just playing defense. She was going on the offensive. I stepped into my office and shut the door, taking a deep breath. Matthew was already there, waiting for me, laptop open, a thick folder resting on the desk between us. "She's moving fast," he said without looking up. "Oh, and of course she is," I muttered, "and she knows she's running out of time." I sat down and opened the folder. Inside were pages of financial records, emails, and meeting transcripts, evidence. "Tell me what I'm looking at," I said, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Matthew leaned forward. "It's worse than we thought. Isabel and Ryan weren't just orchestrating a coup, they were stealing." I didn't react immediately. I had already suspected as much, but seeing it in black and white made it real. "How much?" I asked. "Just over $300,000 in unauthorized transfers," he said. "All funneled through that consulting firm Ryan set up." I exhaled slowly, my fingers tapping against the desk. "And?" Matthew hesitated. "There's more," he admitted. "Isabel had full knowledge of these transactions. She signed off on them." For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something close to genuine shock. I had known she was ruthless, manipulative, calculating, but stealing from the company? She had taken it further than I had anticipated. "She really thought she'd get away with this," I said, almost to myself. Matthew nodded grimly. "She wasn't thinking long-term. She was betting everything on a fast takeover. She needed Ryan in place before anyone could dig too deep." I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I had been prepared for a corporate betrayal, but this was fraud. A sharp knock on the door broke my thoughts. Maria, my executive assistant, poked her head in. "One Lucas, I think you need to see this." She handed me her tablet, the screen already open to an email from Isabel Carter to Carter Innovations' all employees list. Subject: transparency and leadership. Moving forward. I didn't even need to read the whole thing to know what it was. She was doing damage control. She had crafted a careful narrative, painting me as a dictator unwilling to evolve, someone who refused to listen to fresh ideas and had to be forcibly removed for the good of the company. It was masterful, really. She wasn't denying what had happened. She was reframing it. "See, smart," I muttered, handing the tablet back. Matthew snorted. "She's desperate." I nodded toward the folder on my desk. "It's time we show everyone exactly who they're dealing with," Matthew smirked. "Let me handle it." The first public strike hit by noon. The entire company knew the truth. I had leaked everything: the fraudulent transactions, the secret consulting firm, Isabel's direct involvement. It wasn't just an internal memo. It was public. Investors, employees, even clients, everyone saw it. And just like that, Isabel's carefully crafted narrative collapsed. It wasn't about a difference in leadership styles anymore. It was about corruption. I should have expected that she wouldn't go down quietly. At exactly 3:47 in the afternoon, security alerted me that Isabel was in the building. I sighed, standing up. "Of course she is." Matthew cracked his knuckles. "Want me to handle it?" I shook my head. "No, let's hear what she has to say." I left my office and found her waiting for me in the executive lounge. She looked different, the usual poise, the effortless confidence gone. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her face tight with fury. "This is a mistake, Lucas," she said the moment she saw me. I crossed my arms. "Which part? The part where you tried to steal my company, or the part where you committed fraud?" Her lips pressed together. I had no choice. I let out a short laugh. "Oh, no choice?" I repeated. "Oh, you had every choice, Isabel, and you made the wrong one." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand. You've been so focused on your vision for the company that you refuse to see what's coming." I tilted my head. "Enlighten me," she exhaled sharply. "We're stagnating. The market is evolving faster than you're willing to adapt. We should have gone public 2 years ago. We should have expanded faster, taken risks." I studied her, waiting. "And you think Ryan was the answer?" I asked, voice even. "T was willing to push boundaries," she argued. I scoffed. "He was embezzling money." She flinched. She knew I was right, but instead of admitting it, she changed tactics. "Ors, you're going to regret this," she said, her voice lower now. I held her gaze. "Is that a threat?" Her jaw clenched. "It's a reality check. You think you've won, Lucas? You haven't. The board still wants change." I shrugged. "Oh, and they can want whatever they like. I have the majority vote, and now I have every reason to make sure you never step foot in this company again." I pulled a document from my pocket and handed it to her. She frowned. "What is this?" Point termination notice, I said. Her face paled. Contest isn't over, she whispered. I smiled slightly. Oh, Isabel, I said, stepping closer. It's over the moment I say it is. And I turned and walked away. By the end of the day, Isabel's access had been revoked. Her emails shut down, her security clearance deleted, her name stripped from every official company record. She had become a ghost overnight, and yet I knew she wouldn't stop, because for someone like Isabel, losing was never an option. I sat in my office staring at my phone. Then, at 11:23 at night, it buzzed. A single message from Isabel. "Two may have won this round, but I'm not finished." I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the phone. Then I responded with just 3 words. "Well, yes, you are." And I blocked her number. I knew better than to assume Isabel would disappear quietly. She had spent months, maybe even years, weaving her web of manipulation. She had built alliances, whispered doubts into the ears of board members, and painted herself as the future of Carter Innovations, and in a single day I had ripped it all away from her. But people like Isabel didn't know how to lose. They didn't walk away when the game was over. They flipped the board and tried to change the rules. And that's exactly what she did. The first signs of trouble started early the next morning. A few senior executives stopped by my office, their faces carefully neutral, their words polite. "I just wanted to check in," one said. "There's some talk going around." Another hesitated before asking, "Are the layoffs happening?" I frowned, setting down my coffee. "What layoffs?" The executive shifted, looking uncomfortable. "There's a rumor that now that you've secured power, you're planning to restructure, that a lot of people, especially those who supported Isabel, are about to be let go." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Of course. Isabel was poisoning the company from the inside. She wasn't stupid. She knew I wouldn't fire an entire department just because they had sided with her in the coup. But if she could make people believe I would, she could create instability, make me look like the villain. And it was working. By noon, I had dozens of similar conversations. Employees were skittish, unsure of where they stood. My leadership had never been questioned before, but now doubt was spreading like wildfire. And then, just as I expected, I got the call from HR. "And we have a situation," my HR director, Elliot Barnes, said the moment I answered. I rubbed my temples. Let me guess. Employees are submitting resignation requests. Well, not just employees, Elliot said grimly. Entire teams. I met with HR immediately. Elliot laid out the reports in front of me. "We have over 20 key employees who are actively looking to leave," he said, "and another 10 who have already submitted their resignations." I skimmed through the names. These weren't just random employees. These were high-value staff members, the ones running crucial projects. And suddenly, it clicked. "This isn't about destabilizing Carter Innovations," I said slowly. Elliot frowned. "What do you mean?" I looked up. "She's building her own team." Elliot's eyes widened. "You think she's poaching them?" I nodded. "She knows she can't take the company from me, so instead, she's going to take our best people and start fresh somewhere else." Elliot sat back, shaking his head. "That's bold." I let out a short, humorless laugh. Isabel doesn't do small moves. Matthew and I spent the next few hours digging. Isabel was smart, but not careful enough. Security logs showed that for the past 3 weeks, she had been meeting off-site with Daniel Harrison, the CEO of Apex Technologies, one of our biggest competitors. Apex wasn't just another tech firm, it was a company notorious for hostile takeovers. "So they don't develop their own technology," Matthew said as we stared at the reports. "Then buy out struggling companies, gut them for patents, and then sell off the scraps." I exhaled sharply. "And now Isabel is running to them." Matthew shook his head. "She's not running to them." He turned the screen toward me. "She's working with them." I narrowed my eyes at the screen, meeting logs, dinner reservations, security footage. 3 separate meetings between Isabel and Daniel Harrison, and I didn't need to guess what they were discussing. I sat back, pressing my fingers together. "She's not just trying to start over, she's trying to sell them our research." I immediately called a meeting with senior leadership. "Oh, we have a situation," I told them bluntly. "But there's an active attempt to poach our key talent and leak confidential company information to Apex Technologies." There was a murmur around the room. Some executives looked stunned, others, like Matthew and Elliot, nodded, already having connected the dots. "We're not going to let that happen," I continued. "And starting today, any employee in discussions with Apex will have their access revoked immediately." One executive, Laura Patel, frowned. "Lucas, are we sure about this?" Some of these employees might just be caught in the middle. I met her gaze. I don't take risks when it comes to my company's future. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. I turned to Elliot. Paul and I want a full audit of all employees. If any confidential data has been accessed, I want to know exactly when and by whom. And if we find something? He asked. I held his gaze. I know what to do. By the end of the day, we had our answer. 2 employees, both senior engineers, had downloaded company research onto external drives. The data? Proprietary AI software, our most valuable asset. Both of them had tendered their resignations that morning. They weren't just leaving, they were taking our work with them. I didn't hesitate. I called security. Within an hour, both were escorted out of the building, their files flagged, their access revoked. And Isabel? She made her next move within minutes. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. That was a mistake, Lucas. You're making enemies. I smirked and responded, So I don't mind enemies. I just don't tolerate traitors. I left the office late that night, exhaustion creeping in. I had spent the day reinforcing the company, locking down every possible leak, making sure Isabel's plan failed before it even got off the ground. But I knew she wasn't done. She'd been humiliated once, and now I had done it again. I stepped into the parking garage, the quiet hum of my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. As I unlocked my car, I heard it, the familiar click of heels. I didn't turn around immediately, but I already knew who it was. Isabel. She stood near one of the support pillars, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Do you really think this is over? She said quietly. I sighed, finally turning to face her. It was over the moment you tried to betray me. She took a step forward. Oh, if you don't understand what you're doing. I laughed under my breath. Oh no, Isabel, you don't understand. Her jaw tightened. Q1 because of fine print, because you had an insurance policy hidden in the company's founding documents. But there are other ways to force change. I tilted my head. Like running to Apex? Trying to sell them our research? She flinched, just slightly. I stepped closer. You're not a visionary, Isabel. You're a parasite. And I'm cutting you off. A flicker of something crossed her face. Anger, maybe even regret. Then, just like that, she turned on her heel and walked away. I didn't stop her. I had already won, but I knew, deep in my gut, that the war wasn't over. Not yet. I should have expected it. After everything that had happened, the boardroom coup, the fraud, the blatant betrayal, it was only a matter of time before my parents got involved. But even knowing that, I wasn't prepared for how fast Isabel had moved. The moment I saw my father's name flash across my phone screen, I knew she had already twisted the narrative in her favor. I let the call ring out. Then a text came through. Dinner tonight. No excuses. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. I could ignore it, but I knew better. If I didn't go, they'd show up at my office, and the last thing I needed was my parents storming in while I was trying to keep my company from collapsing under the weight of Isabel's destruction. So, I texted back, Fine, 7 o'clock. Then I turned to Matthew, who was reviewing a stack of reports in my office. I need a drink, I muttered. He didn't even look up. Bad news? I held up my phone. Family dinner. Matthew smirked. Ah, the real battlefield. I exhaled. And you have no idea. My parents' house was exactly the same as it had been my entire life. A sprawling, elegant home in an old-money neighborhood, the kind of place where appearances mattered, where family always came first whether it was deserved or not. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then, with a slow breath, I stepped out of the car. The door swung open before I even reached the porch. My mother stood there, arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. Lucas, she said, you're late. I checked my watch. It's 7:02. She didn't respond, just turned and walked inside. Yeah, this was going to be fun. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw them. My father stood by the fireplace, his expression unreadable. My mother took a seat on the sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. And then there was Isabel, sitting at the dining table, a glass of wine in hand, looking perfectly at ease. I stopped in my tracks, my jaw tightening. Are you kidding me? I said, my voice sharp. My mother sighed. Lucas, sit down. I didn't move. She's the reason we're here, isn't she? She's family, my father said, as if that explained everything. I let out a humorless laugh. Family? I repeated. She's also the woman who just tried to steal my company. My father's eyes darkened. That's not how she tells it. I turned to Isabel, who sipped her wine without a care in the world. Of course it's not, I muttered. She finally looked up, tilting her head. I told them the truth. I clenched my fists. And you? She set the glass down. In it you've been obsessed with control, that you refuse to listen to new ideas, that you'd rather destroy Carter Innovations than let someone else lead. I scoffed. That's rich, coming from the woman who, oh, right, stole company funds and tried to hand our research to a competitor. My mother's face tightened. Uncas, oh no, I snapped, turning to her. Ain't I need to know, did she tell you that? Did she mention that she committed actual fraud? A flicker of hesitation crossed my father's face. Isabel sighed dramatically. Oh, and wasn't fraud. I laughed. Funneled money through a shell company, Isabel. You don't get to sugarcoat that. She rolled her eyes. You always have to be so dramatic. I stepped closer. And you always have to be the victim, don't you? Her expression hardened. This is exactly why I did what I did. You refused to see reality. Carter Innovations could have been 10 times bigger by now if you weren't so afraid of change. He went afraid of change? I repeated. Dana were afraid of handing my company over to someone completely unqualified? My mother stood. Enough, she said, her voice firm. I turned to her. Oh no, Mom, it's not enough. You don't get to sit here and act like this is just some petty sibling rivalry. She's trying to help, my mother insisted. She's trying to help herself, I corrected. My father stepped forward, his eyes sharp. Oh, Lucas, we raised you to value family above everything else. I met his gaze without flinching. And I value integrity more. A heavy silence filled the room. My father exhaled slowly. 12 years, Lucas. 12 years of your life, and for what? You have no wife, no children, just this company. And now you're willing to tear this family apart for it. I set my jaw. I'm not the one who tore this family apart. I turned to Isabel. She held my gaze, but I saw it. The flicker of something beneath her carefully crafted mask. She expected me to break, to crumble under the weight of family loyalty. She had always been the favorite, the golden child, the one my parents had protected, excused, indulged. And now, for the first time, she was losing. She didn't know what to do with that. My mother's voice softened. Lucas, sweetheart, can't we find a way to move forward as a family? I looked at her, then at my father, then at Isabel, and I finally saw the truth. They would never see it my way, because they didn't want to. It was easier to believe that I was the problem, that I was stubborn, unwilling to compromise. It was easier than admitting that Isabel had burned everything to the ground for her own ambition. I took a slow breath. No, I said finally. We can't. My mother's face fell. Lucas. I won't pretend this didn't happen, I continued. And I won't let her manipulate you into believing she's the victim. I turned to Isabel. And made your choice, and now you're going to have to live with it. Her expression remained unreadable. I grabbed my coat. Done here. Then I walked to the door. Just as I reached for the handle, my father's voice stopped me. Is this really what you want, son? He asked quietly. I didn't turn around. I want my company back, I said. And I want the people who betrayed me to face the consequences of their actions. I opened the door but glanced over my shoulder. Most of all, I said, he said, I want to never have to justify protecting what's mine ever again. And with that, I walked out. That night, as I sat in my office staring out at the city skyline, my phone buzzed. A message from Isabel. Fish, hope you enjoyed the family meeting. There's more where that came from. I exhaled sharply. Then I pulled out my laptop and sent an email to Matthew. Find out every financial move Isabel made in the last 2 years. I want records. Because if she wanted war, she was about to get one. I sat in my office, staring at the report on my laptop screen, fingers tapping against the desk. It was all there, every shady transaction, every mismanaged budget, every unauthorized access log. For months, maybe longer, Isabel had been funneling company resources into her own side projects, diverting funds into Ryan's fake consulting firm, and leaking sensitive data to Apex Technologies. And now, I had proof. Matthew sat across from me, watching my reaction carefully. Well, he asked. I let out a slow breath. She really thought she'd get away with this. He smirked. Of course she did. She thought she was untouchable. Not anymore, I said. Oh, not after this. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. What's our next move? Matthew's eyes gleamed. One bury her. I didn't act immediately. I waited, because if there was one thing I had learned about Isabel, it was that she never stopped moving. She was always scheming, always looking for the next advantage, always planning 2 steps ahead. So I wanted to see what she'd do next. And sure enough, she made her move the very next morning. At exactly 9:17 in the morning, I received an email from an unknown address. Subject line, Art Urgent, Carter Innovations in Financial Trouble. I clicked it. Inside was an anonymous report filled with fabricated financial projections, exaggerated losses, and claims that the company was on the verge of collapse. It was written in the language of concern, but I saw it for what it was, a setup, and I knew exactly who was behind it. By 11 o'clock in the morning, news outlets had picked up the story. Articles flooded my inbox, all with similar headlines. NT's Carter Innovations on the brink, and financial mismanagement at Carter tech giant, Carter faces uncertain future. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down. Matthew walked in, his expression dark. Well, she's playing dirty. I smirked. She always does. But what Isabel didn't realize was that she had just given me the final piece of leverage I needed. She had fabricated a crisis, which meant she was acting out of desperation, which meant I had already won. Now, all I had to do was finish the job. I didn't wait for her to make the next move. I made it for her. That evening, I arrived at her penthouse apartment, unannounced. She opened the door, eyebrows raised. Well, this is a surprise. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Oh, we need to talk. She sighed dramatically. Oh, Lucas, if this is about... I cut her off. It's about the fake financial crisis you just created. Her smirk faltered for half a second, then she rolled her eyes. Oh, please, you can't prove that was me. I pulled out my phone, swiping to a very specific email chain. Her eyes flickered to the screen. I watched as the color drained from her face. She tried to recover. Even if I did send a few emails. Aren't you in few emails? I scoffed. Isabel, you just tanked the stock value of your own family's company. She crossed her arms. Maybe I was just doing what was necessary to expose the truth. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. The truth? I held up another document. Oh, like this unauthorized transfer to Ryan's fake consulting firm? Her jaw tightened. I pressed forward. Or maybe the deleted access logs from 2 weeks ago, the ones showing that you downloaded our proprietary AI research the same day you met with Apex Technologies? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then, for the first time, Isabel's confidence cracked. She swallowed hard. And you wouldn't... Oh, I would, I said smoothly. And because unlike you, I know how to play the long game. The next morning, Carter Innovations filed a formal complaint with the SEC. Every document, every email, every financial transfer submitted for investigation. By noon, Isabel's bank accounts were frozen. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, her apartment had been raided for evidence. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, she was trending on every major news platform, and billionaire heiress investigated for corporate espionage. And Carter Innovation scandal. CEO's wife at the center of fraud allegations. Isabel Carter, mastermind or pawn. And by 8 o'clock in the evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel Harrison, CEO of Apex Technologies. Need to talk. I smirked, because I already knew what he wanted. He was about to cut Isabel loose. The next day, I met Daniel Harrison at his high-rise office. He greeted me with a forced smile. Oh, Lucas, let's be reasonable here. I leaned back in my chair. Unreasonable? I laughed. So, you just tried to steal my company's technology. He sighed. Look, Isabel came to us. We didn't initiate anything. I raised an eyebrow. So, you're admitting that you did discuss our AI research? He paled slightly. I folded my arms. Daniel, let's cut to the chase. You and I both know that Apex Technologies doesn't innovate. You acquire, you steal, and this time you got caught. He exhaled. What do you want? I smiled. Simple. Cut ties with Isabel. Completely, publicly. He hesitated. That's a big ask. I slid a confidential legal document across the table. His eyes scanned it, then he cursed under his breath, because in his hands was proof. Concrete evidence that Apex had engaged in illegal discussions with a Carter Innovations executive. If this went public, his company would burn with Isabel's. I watched him weigh his options. Then, finally, he sighed. Fine, we'll issue a statement. Isabel acted alone. Apex was never involved. I smirked. So, good choice. That evening, Apex Technologies issued a public statement. They denounced any involvement with Isabel Carter, called her a rogue executive who acted without authorization. And just like that, she was completely alone. By the next morning, the SEC investigation had intensified. Her assets were frozen, her reputation in ruins. And then, at midnight, I got a final text from Isabel. Funny you destroyed me. I stared at the message for a long moment, then finally responded, No, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure the world saw it. And then I blocked her number for good. I sat in my office the next morning, watching the city wake up. Carter Innovations was stronger than ever. Isabel was out of my life. The war was over. But as I stared at the skyline, I felt something else settle in my chest. I had won, but at what cost? The family I had once known, gone. The trust I had once had, shattered. I had protected my company, but I had lost everything else, and maybe, just maybe, that had been her plan all along. I should have felt satisfied. The board had been purged, Isabel was publicly disgraced, Apex Technologies had been forced to cut her loose, and now, with the SEC investigating her every move, she was left isolated, broke, and powerless. But I knew Isabel. She wasn't someone who accepted defeat. She was someone who burned everything to the ground on her way out, and I wasn't about to let her take me or Carter Innovations down with her. It was 2:43 in the morning when my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I groaned, rubbing my eyes as I checked the screen. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice cut through the silence. "Is you think you've won?" I exhaled, already exhausted. "Isabel. Said I lost everything because of you," she said. I sat up, gripping the phone tighter. "No, Isabel, you lost everything because you betrayed everything." Silence. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Forget, Lucas. I know all your weaknesses." My jaw clenched. "Is that a threat?" She let out a soft laugh. "I'm just saying. Accidents happen. Investors panic. Stocks drop. One well-timed rumor and even you won't be able to clean up the mess." I ran a hand through my hair. "What do you want?" Her voice sharpened. "Drop the SEC case. Make this go away. Let me walk away from this with something." I let out a slow, measured breath. "Or what?" "Or I drag this company through hell," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Chew with it." I glanced at the clock, 2:45 in the morning, and just like that, I knew what I had to do. By morning, Matthew and I had laid the final trap. "She's desperate," I said, pacing my office, and desperate people make mistakes. Matthew nodded. "What's the move?" I turned to him, my expression cold. "Only let her think she's won." The deal was set for exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I met Isabel at a private suite in one of the city's hotels. She was waiting for me, dressed in the same polished confidence she had always worn. She smirked, and I knew you'd see reason. I took a seat across from her, setting a folder down on the table. "It's what's going to happen," I said, watching her carefully. "Sen, you want a public release saying that the SEC investigation was based on misunderstandings, that Carter Innovations has no interest in pursuing legal action." Her smirk widened. "Good." I didn't stop. "In return, you sign this." I pushed the folder toward her. She opened it, scanning the pages. A non-compete agreement. She laughed. "Oh, Lucas, you can't be serious." "One dead serious," I said evenly. The agreement was ironclad. If she signed it, she would be legally barred from any involvement in tech, finance, or corporate leadership for the next 10 years. Isabel's smirk faded. "No," I leaned back. "Then the SEC case stays open." Her fingers curled around the papers. "Or bluffing." I tilted my head. "Am I?" She hesitated, and in that moment, I knew I had her. For the first time, she realized that this wasn't just a setback. This was the end. She could either fight and lose everything, or she could walk away with what little dignity she had left. Her nails tapped against the table. "Oh, you really think I'll let you erase me like this?" I shrugged. "Oh, I think you don't have a choice." Her jaw clenched. Then, slowly, she reached for the pen, and she signed. Just like that, it was over. By the next morning, the news had broken. Tentinasik investigation closed. Carter Innovations clears former executive. Sententishuate. Lucas Carter retains complete control over tech empire. Isabel Carter resigns from industry, cites personal reasons for exit. Her name was wiped from the corporate world. No investors, no allies, no future in business. She had been exiled, and I had made sure she would never come back. I was leaving the office late that night when I saw her. She stood by my car, arms crossed. I stopped a few feet away. "This is trespassing." She smirked. "What are you going to do, have me arrested?" I sighed. "What do you want, Isabel?" She studied me for a long moment, then finally said, "Did you ever love me?" The question caught me off guard. I exhaled. "I did. Once." Her smirk wavered just slightly. Then she stepped forward. "Ain't one day, Lucas. You're going to look back and wonder if this was worth it." I held her gaze. "I already know it was." She let out a quiet laugh. "Goodbye, Lucas." I watched as she walked away, disappearing into the night. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The war was over, and I had won. Carter Innovations was mine again, stronger than ever. And yet, as I sat in my office staring at the city skyline, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I had protected what I built, but in doing so, I had destroyed what was left of my family. Was it worth it? Yes. Would I do it again? Without hesitation. Because in the end, some battles aren't about winning, they're about survival. And I had survived. A week later, an envelope arrived on my desk. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single note. "You stayed true to your principles. Your mother and I are ready to listen." I stared at the words for a long time, then slowly pinned the letter to my bulletin board, a reminder that while power can be taken, trust has to be earned back. And maybe, just maybe, some things can still be rebuilt.